Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're so glad to welcome you as part of our community tonight. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and distributed live stream. By entering this virtual meeting room, you give your consent to be recorded and distributed by Simeon Morrow EU and other third parties. If you prefer to not be recorded, please turn off your camera and microphone and or go to the Facebook live video feed, the link to which I will now place in the chat room. For a better experience, please turn off your microphone and set your video to gallery view. This edition of Vienna Live with Simeon Morrow is dedicated to the heroic patients and heroic staff of the Hackensack University Medical Center. Tonight, our featured guest is Bob Vergara, a professional photographer based in New York. Bob, welcome.
Yes, nice to be with you again, Sim. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks. So tell us about, how did you get into photography? When and why did you get interested in it?
Well, I think way back to my high school days, I kind of learned the hard way that I didn't follow rules very well. You know, that was a situation. And I just kind of felt that I saw things just a little bit differently than the friends and neighbors around me. So I didn't choose the automatic four-year college route after high school. I decided that you know, I needed something that was a little off the beaten track, and I thought photography would be able to provide that for me. I first tried my hand at filmmaking, and we made a movie, but it was not that successful. So when I needed a job and I needed work, I signed on with a family portrait photography company, just to pay the bills. And basically that's what led to having my commercial studio for 33 years. I was able to shoot the family portraits on the weekends, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and develop the commercial business during the week.
So did you study photography, or did you just
Yeah.
were you an amateur before, or how did that work?
No, I did study. After high school, I wound up going, when I decided I wasn't going to college for 4 years, the idea of a trade school kind of made more sense. So I did go to the Germain School of Photography. I studied photography and motion picture photography in those days. And it was a great experience. The professor there was tremendous and made lots of contacts with the fellow students there. We were down there in Lower Manhattan when they were building the World Trade Center, which has always had a special spot for me. When the professor would let us out with cameras, we would all just zoom over to the site where the Twin Towers were being built. And it was just an amazing kind of visual thing to capture. So I've always been attached to that. But yeah, Germain School of Photography, which was connected to St. John's University at that time.
Okay, got it. So let's take a look right away at some of your work. Let me see here if I can get it. So I have to apologize beforehand to our viewers because I'm going to go quite fast because we have a lot of photos to cover. Yeah. Can everyone see that?
Yeah, Sim, that is the only family portrait I have to show. You know, when I was doing the family portraits, it taught me three things. One was you needed to rely completely on your equipment because we had to shoot quickly. You could perhaps shoot 100 families in a 3-day period. So things had to move rapidly. You had to have utmost confidence in your equipment. That was number one. All the lights were 6 feet high, 6 feet apart, 6 feet to the subject. Everything was nailed down. So you had to shoot that way. The second thing I learned was how to photograph children, which, you know, I used my juggling skills to eventually capture their attention and it led to good things in my commercial career later on as well. So we may see some of that. And the last thing was, even though I wasn't aiming to be a family portrait photographer, and I didn't find this work, creative or inspiring, I got my inspiration from the fact that these family portraits would mean a great deal to somebody in that family down the road later on. So, I always try to be the best family photographer I could be, because I knew it would mean a lot to some people down the road. But ended that, I was happy to stop doing that work and move on to the commercial work in the
And
studio.
so Bob, so this photo, you said actually that you had turned your back.
Yeah, well, one of the tools we had was an air release. It was a rubber syringe with a long black tube that hooked into the shutter of the camera. So when you squeeze the ball, it would fire the shutter and do all that stuff. It helped so you could jump in and out of the set and grab the people. But when this happened, I had dropped the ball. It was on the floor, and the person who was with me said, "Oh, look, turn around." And having turned my back on it was a mistake. I turned around and I saw this happening, but the ball was on the floor. So I reached out and stepped on it. And I'll never forget that, that's the only way I could have captured this moment, which lasted about a second. But yeah, it's a memorable moment. Yeah.
Magical.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Those
studio and location photography.
Yes. This is what we did day in and day out. Studio photography is basically breaks down into two time periods: before the digital revolution and after. That all happened around the year. For us, it was 2001 when we became completely digital. But we started the business in 1981, so it was 20 years of, just with film, it was, you buy the film, you shoot the job, you process the film, you look at it, and it's all in that kind of a time period and how things are done. We had to process our own 4x5 transparencies. So the job or the shot wouldn't be done until we pulled the transparencies out of the processor and looked at them and had the final word. We would shoot Polaroids, black and white Polaroids, in the studio in those days. And I think that the most telling feature, the difference between that and the digital era was, we would shoot a Polaroid of a setup, and then somebody would say, well, change that, move this, let's do it differently. We shoot another Polaroid and another Polaroid, and we would sometimes put them up on the wall, but eventually the client or somebody would say, oh, that one you did, the first one you did an hour ago, that's the one we want. So we would have to reset things and try to get back to that exact pose. With the digital era, the shots were taken and directed right into the computer sitting next to the shooting table. So we had these big, beautiful images there. And we would also say, change this, do that, change this, do that. But if an hour later, the client wanted to go back to that first shot we had done, it's still right there, So
Bob, tell us, so this became your passion, all of these objects that we're seeing. This was, you said you left family portraits so that you could do these kind of this kind of studio work.
Right. Just anything commercial. We had a phrase, no weddings and no bar mitzvahs. I have the utmost respect for wedding photographers. They do a great job under a tremendous amount of pressure, but it's a completely separate thing. Where we are, you cannot be taken seriously as a commercial photographer if you're doing weddings, so
Right.
it was
Sure.
completely,
So we had. So you would have companies come to you and they said, we want you to photograph this jewelry, and they would give you what they wanted, and then you would just set it up and then.
Exactly. In this case, these were done for Dress Barn, which is a female clothing retail outlet. And we would shoot, gosh, it started as about 100 shots a week. We did this for their e-commerce website. But there were garments, and then there were accessories. So this jewelry is part of the accessories, but it had to be so detailed. Even this little keeper chain up at the top there, that had to be in the same kind of sloping motion on just about every shot. So
Wow.
the design, the layout, the earrings, you know, the hooks on the earrings, all of that, that was our stylist. And we had 2 studios going at once. And yeah, it
So
started
they
as
really
about
knew what they wanted.
pretty much, you know, they would give us, this stuff would come in a bag, you know, plastic bag with 50 other shots. And it was up to us to lay it out and to show it from the most flattering point of view, and to light it and to do everything that needed to be done. Tedious work, definitely. Yeah.
Got it. So now we're going on, you also did people as part of the studio work.
Yeah. Yeah. This is a portrait. Sorry for the bad copy, but uh, this is a modeling portfolio that this young woman was part of. And we did that. We didn't photograph people that much. We did executive portraits quite a bit. This is some of the dress barn accessories that we shot. As I said, it was started at about 100 shots a week when they launched their e-commerce site. By the time, you know, 2 or 3 years later, uh, it was up to 350 shots a week.
So
So
you had a lot of work.
yeah, we did. We had the 2 studios going. We had 2 stylists, 2 photographers. You know, this again, same thing with Dress Barn. Um, all the we would go up there on Monday morning and drop off the previous week's stuff, and they would load up our van with the next week's stuff. And that was one of the things, you know, the whole success of the commercial business was the fact that we could convince clients locally that they didn't have to go to Manhattan, to New York City proper, to these big studios to have exactly the same quality of photography done, cheaper, faster, you know, and logistically much easier.
So Bob,
Myself and everyone who worked for me had experience in those New York City studios. So there was no magic bullet. There was nothing we were missing. And because we didn't have the high ceilings, our motto was high ceilings and low rent.
got
Here's
it.
a shot of this young fella where, you know, my years of photographing children came in handy to get the expression like that on this kid. The clients were very happy with that kind of thing.
Had to do a little bit of juggling.
Yes, right. Yeah, this is part of a campaign we did for the hospital where they wanted to show their doctors and their hobbies, or, you know, other stuff. It was a very successful program for them. But, you know, we froze our butt off that day, and that is one large horse.
Hmm.
And this is a very nice, friendly doc. This is interesting. We worked for a wind farm company, and they sent us to a couple of different places. These were shot in a small upstate town called Ellenburg. Not many people have heard of it, but this is where they chose to put their wind turbines. These things are amazing. The turbine itself is, the stand is 185 feet high, and the blades are 125 feet. So, you know, when you stand under them, there's 60 feet between you and the top of and these blades as they're going by. But you wouldn't stand directly under them, because the whoosh of these blades coming by is just it's amazing. But lent for some very great visuals. We had a ton of fun doing it, and this is part of the, you know, spillover from the aerial photography we did. We did some aviation photography like this. This Learjet, I believe it is. Just, you know, the tremendous amount of coordination for them to bring this thing and trailer it out into the right spot, and for us to be there to photograph them.
So this is, like you said, location photography as opposed to
Yeah,
studio photography.
absolutely. Um, they're just so beautiful, these planes. You really don't have to do very much except coordinate time of day and positioning and that kind of thing, and just, you know, capture it for what it is. We spend a
And
lot
this
of
is
time in interviews.
okay. And then we have here must be an executive photo.
Exactly. He is county executive of where we live, and one of the politicians that we photographed this way and in other aspects. But it was always good that when the corporations would send someone in for an executive portrait, we had a captive audience. We would say to that person, hey, we do other types of photography too. We can help you out, at the company. The other thing we did to our advantage was we said, you can send them one at a time all you want, but we have a service where we will come to you. We'll set up a portable studio in a conference room somewhere, and you can schedule as many executives throughout the day as need photos. And that was a time when, annual reports and things, they wanted a consistent look to their people. They would ask their executives to send in photos, and you'd have something of a guy standing next to his Christmas tree, so they wanted that consistency of executive portraiture. And that worked out great for us. We would set up in a conference room. They would send 12 people for the cost of, 2 or 3. And everybody seemed to be happy. At one point, we did, I think we did 80 chase executives one morning in 90 minutes. So that's the world's record. Again, this is just typical, one-off stuff that we shot in the studio. Headshot for African American. He's a Haitian American, Joe is, and I present it only because he's well lit. His facial features. I think sometimes African Americans, especially those with really dark complexions, may not be lit properly. I think sometimes, more often than it should happen. It was, what can I say? This was a poster, signed poster, and it's sold quite a few of them, unbeknownst to me. But just a breeder friend of mine who had these puppies, and we propped one up on the Polaroid one day and made a lot of money. So, not that should always. This is our studio, our building. Was an old pill factory. We had the top floor of that building with a freight elevator that came up and down, and the rest of this small offices were small studios in the building. And then, we always thought it was somewhat inspirational to be in a building like this, which was so unusual, and have the influence of so many different artists and different types of artists all around the building. So that was our building. It's still there. My studio is still up there. I am currently retired, however, but the business goes on.
Fantastic. So if there are any questions, we have Bob is here to answer your questions. Just turn on your microphone, write something in the chat room. So Bob, so we just looked at a bunch of studio and location photography. Mm-hmm. So generally speaking, did that become, how important was that? Was that like the main part of the work that you did?
Yes, it was. That was our bread and butter, as it were, to do that type of photography. The more days we spent shooting in the studio or on location for corporate stuff, the guys sitting around the boardroom and things like that. Those two areas, I would say, and it was mostly, I would say 2/3 of it was product photography on the table. And 1/3 of it was corporate stuff on location. And occasionally on location to places we had no idea what we were going to find and how we were going to do it. We photographed mattresses for the Sleep Number company. And there, the whole set is built and ready to go. And we just moved our equipment and our computers and everything in and did the photography on location. Other times we went to factories and places where we had no idea where we were going to be. One of my clients was a nursing association, APIC, Association for Practitioners in Infection Control. They had large conferences once a year, and they took me with them wherever they went around the country. And one year we were in Cincinnati, Ohio, and one of the things they wanted was it was a huge trade show set up within the conference itself. All the major pharmaceutical companies were there and lots of medical industry companies. And they always wanted a single shot of the entire trade show floor. So this one in Cincinnati, I remember, I got into what's called a genie lift, kind of an interior thing where there's a bucket on the top for two people, and they raised the lift up to the ceiling. And I couldn't quite get the whole thing fit in. And I was backing up and telling the maintenance guy, back up a little further, back up a little further. And we finally backed up under kind of a soffit of the ceiling. So we were now really close to the ceiling above our heads. And I didn't realize that this was a diesel engine, and it was puffing smoke up into the smoke detectors. And while we're up there at 25 feet and looking down and backed up as far as we could, the alarms go off. The smoke alarms and, you know, sirens and the emergency lighting, and the announcement comes to evacuate the building. So he evacuated the entire Cincinnati Convention Center. And, you know, I turned to the guy I was with and I said, well, what do we do now? He said, well, we're here now. You might as well get the shot, which I did. I turned around and made sure I got the great shot of this big convention. And then he brings me down and I go out and stand with everybody else outside the convention center as the fire trucks are pulling in one after another. And I'm standing there wondering, do I confess to this, or do I hope they never figure out who the responsible party is? And when we got the all clear to go back in, the president of the association put her arm around me and said, don't let that happen again. Okay, Sparky?
Understood. Okay, so let's go on, Bob. We're going on now to aerial photography.
Yeah. I'm not a fan of selfies, but this one I like. That's me and my pilot, Dennis. And you can make out the Empire State Building and the Freedom Tower off in the distance to the right. So we're on our way back to the airport. We're about to cross over the Hudson River here. And I just wanted to capture where we had been and what it's like inside that tiny little two-seater helicopter.
Take a look at it.
Yeah. You know, you're a victim of that one little small piston in the back there. Bigger helicopters are safer maybe, but too expensive. So helicopter pilots will say that they're safer than planes because they can put down in a backyard or something small if there's catastrophic engine failure. Fixed wing plane pilots will tell you that they're safer because you have every 1,000 feet of altitude, you have 1 minute of glide time. So if you do have an engine failure in a fixed wing plane at 1,500 feet, you would have 1.5 minutes to find a golf course or a roadway or something like that. So I don't know who's right when it comes to that, but we never had any kind of.
So tell us about this photo, Bob.
Okay, this is a helicopter company in New Jersey, Teterboro, New Jersey. They had just purchased this brand new state-of-the-art Italian helicopter. It's an Augusta. And they put me in their old helicopter, and we told the local towers that we would be a flight of two. So the two of us were in tandem with each other, and I was photographing their new helicopter. Well, one of the more exciting things to do, to keep an eye on the other helicopter and fly through, you know, where I did my aerials is the busiest airspace on the planet, with Kennedy Airport, LaGuardia Airport, and Newark International Airport. So, you know, it was always difficult to be dodging other planes and to be filing a flight plan and asking permission to be in a certain area. This is, you know, what it looks like relatively today on a clear day. You see the Brooklyn Bridge off there to the right, and all the way up on the top center of the frame kind of is the George Washington Bridge, which kind of separates New York City from the rest of the world. Yeah, nothing more exciting than this. I flew in planes and helicopters, and it's a thrill. I would have done nothing else if I could have. This is just a version of that kind of a shot, different altitude, and something that I turned black and white just for the hell of it, I guess, and to see how it looked. And it just became more of a visual during the pandemic, I guess, where we just kind of, New York City has a kind of black eye at the moment, and but it will come back. And this is just a panoramic version of that shot, stretched out, to show what can be done.
We have a note from Stephanie Morales, who writes, beautiful.
Oh, thank you. There was an online gallery recently sponsored by my union, Local 600 cinematographers, and they asked still photographers to submit personal work. And those black and white aerials of New York City were pretty well received, I guess. This is a research vessel from Columbia University, and it was coming back in. The interesting story here is we had to coordinate with the ship arriving after 2 years of being at sea. It was coming back to be refitted and worked on. And we coordinated with everything, and the captain of the ship as well. When I get to the helicopter with Dennis that morning, he said, "Oh, well, the alternator is not working." He said, "But the helicopter will still fly. It's just a matter of, we may run out of communication or lights or things like that." He said, "But don't worry, here's a life preserver, and this will inflate automatically when you hit the water." So I said, "Wait a minute, Dennis, we had to fly like 5 miles out into the ocean, and the ship was a little late, and we were running out of energy, and we had to shoot it in Manhattan Harbor, naturally, with the big landmarks behind it. And it was very touch and go there for a while."
And Bob, this is, of course, the World Trade Center after September 11th?
Yeah, this is September 13th. And this is as close as I could get. The security around here was unbelievable. I had been working on what was called the Hudson River Park Trust, this beautiful stretch of land that they renovated the west side of the New York West Side Highway with, and it is below Canal Street, so it was very close to this area. So while I wasn't there on that day or subsequent days, I was always in the shadow of the World Trade Center in that area. And these shards, they look like they're coming up, but they're not. They had come down, and it was a sad day.
What was your feeling when you got there? I mean,
Yeah.
what did it feel like?
Well, I just couldn't believe the whole thing, because I had such an attachment to the World Trade Center. I'm sorry. It just was beyond belief. I mean, first to feel as though that they had been damaged, and then to see one of them collapse, and then to see the other one collapse. I mean, I don't think the bad guys really anticipated that much of a home run. I mean, that's a grand slam in the ninth inning. We have neighbors that worked in the building and are deceased, so it just it was stunning. Yeah, extreme wide angle with the towers and looking north, and it's the most expensive real estate on earth, I guess, right there. And we spend a lot of time up there. You see the Brooklyn Bridge. There are 3 bridges here: Brooklyn, Manhattan, and Williamsburg. We would always refer to it as BMW, so we knew where we were and what we were photographing. But you see Central Park in the distance. This is another air-to-air shot. Again, has to be well coordinated, and both pilots have to know where they're going, and you can get as close as you can, and you can pretty much make out the pilot in this shot, which I'm pretty happy about. Yeah, this has its kind of Hindenburg kind of look to it, the blimp and the Empire State Building. This is Westchester County Airport, where I flew in and out of hundreds of times. What you can't see here, because maybe it's too small, is that there is a a regional jet right on the tip of the airport. See where that white box is? Right below that, there is an airplane on final approach. You can see the shadow of it to the right there too. So that's what kind of made this one fairly unique. The airport used it in advertising a lot. And, you know, one of the things about doing the aerials is, even though we were this close to the airport, if we were at a certain safe altitude, the controllers would let you in, assuming that everyone landing and departing would be at much lower altitudes. So if you wanted to go to 1,500 or 2,000 feet, they would often tell you as you approached an airport to overhead the field, you know, so they could keep an eye on you, and you could stay out of the traffic of these other planes. I mean, we statue. Every photographer has lots of pictures of the statue. I like this because it has the ferry in the background, you know, so the Statue of Liberty and Ellis Island, that whole area are just, you know, remarkable to the history of this country and New York in particular. And, you know, how many hundreds of thousands of immigrants came in through Ellis Island, which is right next door to the Statue of Liberty, and how many of them, you know, what it meant to see this statue. We've photographed it many, many times, and it's just a great, meaningful landmark in the New York Harbor. The Yankee Stadium, the new and the old Yankee Stadium. I have to mention that I'm a Met fan, so, you know, this Yankee stuff doesn't do it for me. But when they hired us, they didn't ask whether we were Yankee fans or not. So, yeah, Turner Construction, they're one of the largest in the world, I think. And we were able to get these shots during the final stages of the new Yankee Stadium, which is in the background of this photo. Rather just behind. This is interesting. This is part of Trump National Golf Course in Briarcliff Manor, New York. We did aerials of this golf course for them, and they were very happy with them. I actually got to meet Donald Trump. There was a grand opening, kind of in the clubhouse of the golf course there. They had tons of people there. It's a beautiful space, lots of big corporate mucky mucks in the grand opening of this, and Donald and Melania were there. And my contact for the aerials had said, oh, come and take pictures. And I said, well, I don't really do those kind of cocktail hour, you know, pictures. And I said, well, I'll come and do it if you promise me that you'll introduce me to Donald Trump. And he said, no problem, come. So I did, and I took pictures. This was around the time when Melania had just gotten engaged, and everyone was talking about how enormous the wedding ring was. So I'm there and took a few photos. And early on, I noticed that Mr. Trump and Melania were leaving. So I grabbed my contact and I said, come on, we're gonna catch up to them. And we did, and we went out into the lobby there, and the contact said, this is Bob Vergara. He did the aerial photos. And Trump said, oh, great job, really great. He said, I want you to go do some more of them. I want you to do more of them. Will you do more of them? And I said, yeah, sure, no problem. So that was it. I wasn't supposed to shake his hand, but I did. Again, I don't follow the rules that well. It was just an instinct. And that was the end of that. The windup was, they ordered an enormous enlargement of this particular shot, and they wanted it in an ornate gold frame, which we did, but they had kind of a problem with the price of all of this stuff. So I said, well, I'll take off the delivery charge if I can deliver it directly and see Mr. Trump again. And they said, okay, that's fine. So I went there and I spent 3 hours waiting in a waiting room, and subsequently people would come out and say, no, you can't go in. No, you can't. No, you can't. And eventually I said, well, that was part of the deal, you know, and they ignored that, and they took the photo, and I left, and I didn't get to meet him. But that was my experience with Donald Trump. I also
Okay.
worked for Hillary Clinton, I think I should say, in the interest of giving equal time to equal parties. Uh, Again, the wind farms in Ariel, upstate New York, uh, the Brooklyn Bridge with this art installation below it. And I don't know how many people got to see it. You know, boaters certainly did, and we certainly saw it. But it was great. It was great fun. It was definitely something unique, and you know, to fly in this particular area is it's very congested airspace.
Wonderful. So tell us, Bob, about this. When you would get hired to fly in a plane, I mean, it must be extremely expensive. I mean, and they tell you, we're going to hire, you hire the pilot, we'll
Mhm.
fly you, and then
Yeah.
who pays?
Well, the way we did it was we would pay for plane and pilot, which, believe it or not, is not that expensive. You know, these planes are mostly used as for flight instructors to teach people how to fly. It's a Cessna 172, and you know they rent for about $100 an hour, and the pilot is about $50 an hour, and most of our flights were, you know, 2 to 3 hours long, and we would shoot multiple sites on each flight. One of our strategies was to send all our clients a note looking ahead a couple of days at what was going to be a good weather day wise. We would say, oh, we're going to be flying in your area, you know, in the next on Thursday or what have you. And if anyone is in need of aerial photographs of their project, this would be a good time. We would entice them with the idea that they would get a second sight discount, um, which they really, you know, that was up to us to decide what to charge them and those kind of things. But helicopters were more expensive, so I used them less.
And when was the first time though? Because you did a lot of studio work, you said, and then what was it
Right.
like when they call you and they say, we want you to
Yeah.
fly in this helicopter and take these photos or in this jet?
Yeah, the first time was hairy as could be, and I happened to know a guy who was a pilot, and I said, you know, this is what we have to do, and we have to take a screw out of the window of the plane so that the window flies up and goes parallel to the wing, and you could shoot down below. But it was, you know, he was kind of a cowboy in terms of flying as well. And the landing and, you know, getting to the site is one thing. Photographing the site is, you know, the second aspect of it, and getting home safely is the last aspect of it. You know, he was a bit of a cowboy, and the landing, I remember screeching the tires and coming to a stop real fast. And but I always had utmost respect for the pilots. They always did their pre-flight walk around to make sure the planes were maintained. General aviation is safer than driving to the airport. You know, it just really is. You hear about small planes crashing on occasion, but it's really few and far between when you consider how many small private planes are out there and flying every day.
Understood.
Um,
So let's go on to our last section, motion pictures.
Go to the movies. Yeah, I put this photo in. I'm glad you chose it, Sim. This is the director, Jonathan Demme. He is the guy who got me going in the motion picture industry. He had been a friend forever, local neighbor here in Nyack, where I live, which is a great artist community here on the Hudson River, 20 miles north of New York City. Jonathan directed Silence of the Lambs and got an Oscar for that. He also directed Philadelphia with Tom Hanks and um, Denzel Washington, which was the first movie to deal with AIDS. And he just, we went to his funeral. Tom Hanks said, Jonathan showed us how big a heart can be. And he was just an awesome human being and
And this
had
is a
causes from, yes.
this is a photo of yours
I took this photo of Jonathan
and his car.
and his car at his house in Maine, his cabin on the lake in Maine. From Haitian people to Native Americans to the Black community in this country. The guy was just, everything he did was with a cause in mind. And he sponsored me into the local 600 of the cinematographers and still photographers union. And this was one of the early films that we shot together, Rachel getting married with Anne Hathaway. To be a still photographer on the motion picture set, there's only two requirements. One, you have to get real quality images, and a lot of them. I think on the last movie, I was shooting about 500 images a day. The studio has said, please don't exceed 20,000 images. So you have to get quality images that mimic the look of the film as close as possible, without, of course, getting in anybody's way. The second part of it is you have to get along with everybody, from Meryl Streep on down to the director of photography and all the people involved in the film. Some crews consider the still photographer kind of an annoyance. They get in the way. They're just, they want to shoot after the scene has been shot, which delays things quite a bit. So you have to have a certain finesse about dealing with everybody and maintaining, good relationships with all these people, which
so they're offset here. And
yes, they are. They are. This very early on. That's Anne Hathaway on the right, who was on the verge of big time stardom, and super nice, friendly and accommodating, and Rosemary DeWitt on the other side.
And you're having a conversation with them, or you just said, I'm going to take a photo while you're all relaxing?
This red truck pulled in behind them, and we're sitting. This is the outside of the Ukrainian museum where we shot the rehearsal dinner for the wedding scene. But this red truck just pulled in behind them, and that's what caught my eye. And then I noticed that all three of them were there with their lovely little knees showing and stuff. And I just said, yeah, hey guys, very early on. So I had introduced myself to them already, but hadn't had a lot of interaction. And so do you mind get a shot of the three of you guys? And, oh yeah, sure, Bob, no problem. And they liked it. I liked it. And that's how you get along. Deborah Winger, we became good friends. She occasionally would say, she would say, I don't know, she'd go to the prop master and say, get us a couple of cigarettes. And we would, just kind of kill some downtime. That's why movie crews are so, kind of cohesive, is because it's about that. It's about a lot of downtime, a lot of standing around, a lot of talking to each other, and then hurry up and be ready, and boom, you have to be on top of your game at that particular time, and however long that takes. This is one of the scenes under the tent in the wedding, and actually the woman in this picture was part of a documentary that Jonathan Demme shot about the aftermath of the Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans. He went down there and made a film called The Right to Return, which followed certain people after the hurricane. And this young woman was one of them, and he brought her from New Orleans to New York to be an extra in this movie. He had certain loyalties to people, and it was just.
Bob, why? What does this photo serve, though? What purpose does it have?
Well, this is just a promotional kind of thing for any of the photos that appeared online, that appeared in publications and things like that. A candid wedding scene photo kind of.
Got it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. This, of course, the same kind of thing. They were skeptical at one point in the very beginning of having me do this. They said, well, Bob doesn't have that much experience, and he's not on our regular list of still photographers. And Jonathan insisted. And they said, well, we're going to send you a list of still photographers. And Jonathan said, you can send all the lists you want, but Bob Vergara is my photographer. So, you know, they kind of threw me in into the deep end of the pool, and you know, I knew I could do it. That shot there, Jonathan used to operate by having me bring him 10 8x10s every morning. He said, I want you to bring me your 10 favorite shots every morning of the day before. So it was a lot of work, but I did that. And he was always remarking that he hoped the film looked as good as these photos. Now, if you go back here, this we shot in Nashville, Tennessee for 2 days at the Grand Ole Opry. It's a Neil Young Heart of Gold is the name of the film. Now, I pointed out for this reason. In the original shot, you see the mic stands going up left and right there, and the microphone even lands over Neil's hat there in the picture, and over his fingers, right? So keep that in mind. Now switch to mic stands are gone. Mic on top of his head is gone. And the oddball thing for me is his fingers were replaced on the frets of the guitar. And I always wondered, you know, is that proper? You know, are those fingers playing the right chord there that he would be playing, or is that something? But anyway, it's just a you know, symbol of how photography is done. This I saw during the dress rehearsal, that previous one, the dark one. When the song was over, the lights would go down. And as they went down, the color temperature of these lights was changing, you know. So if I caught it in just that particular moment while they were going down, when they went down, they were too dark. And when they were on, they were just average. But I saw this in the dress rehearsal and I said, all right, I'm going to get that last note that he's playing. His hand comes up on the strings, the lights go down. And just as they start to go down, I took this shot so that the colors would be very different from anything else out there. They seemed to like it. This was the cover of my industry magazine. There's a picture of Neil, Rick Rosas, and Kincaid. This is Emmylou Harris and Rick Rosas. Rick was the bass player for Neil Young for many, many, many years. And he was actually in Ricky and the Flash, and he actually passed away during the production.
So Bob, is this you over there?
That is me. That is me. That's my introduction to the movies. Jonathan asked me to play a photographer. I said, I've been rehearsing for 20 years. I guess I can probably play the photographer. So I'm with Denzel Washington in this scene outside of a political campaign was happening. And in the scene, Denzel pushes me out of the way and gets up front to talk to his old army buddy who was there. And after a couple of takes, we go back to our first position, and Denzel says to me from behind, "You're parting." He said, "You're parting. You're getting out of the way. You're anticipating me coming through." He said, "Just stand in there and let me physically, you know, shove you out of the way." And I turned around and said, "What do you know about acting?" No, I didn't say that. I said, "Okay." And we did the scene. This is someone's version of the poster. Yeah, you see the acting going on here? I mean, my left eye and Denzel's are a little more closed than the right one. We're looking in the same direction. After we did the scene, Jonathan called our house that night and said to my wife, "Oh, I've just seen Bob in the dailies and I have to talk to him. I got to tell him what a fantastic job he's doing playing the photographer." Of course, my wife said, "Please don't tell him that. Please don't encourage him." But that was the scene there. And this again, the longest week. Again, I'm lucky to have had the poster on the movies that I've worked on, and I'm proud of that, because in most major motion pictures, they send in a separate photographer to shoot the poster. But in nearly every movie I worked on, my shot is used on the poster. Now, if we go back one here, Sim, this is Olivia Wilde, and you know the idea here is, you know, when you have someone that looks like this, you don't want to do too much. Can you go back one more, Sim? Or yeah, her eyes are the thing here, and everything else is set for you as a still photographer. Um, so your job is to not screw it up, basically, and not try to do anything special to a face like this. There there's about, I don't know, there are a lot of good looking people out there, but some people just look like movie stars. And I think she's one of them. And the eyes honestly make it. So uh, I was just interested in capturing when the eyes said this or that or something else. Here she's looking up into the balcony at her possible boyfriend. And in the next shot, if we can go forward one more. Yeah, here you see the anger in her face, so it's just also very much fun to work with, and you know, always talking to everybody, and she ate with the crew on occasion, which most movie stars don't do. So yeah, you need quality images, and you need to get along with everybody. Jason Bateman and Billy Crudup in that same movie. Um, Jason Bateman was the funniest guy in the world. This is a scene that we shot close up uh, on the west side of Manhattan, Riverside Drive. We were freezing. It was the night before we broke for Thanksgiving, and these two were having this argument in front of the place. And when this argument was over, Olivia Wilde had to come through and stand next to me. It was like a complete tight little spot that we had, the sound guy, the camera guy, and me. And the only space she had was to come and stand right next to me. So after a couple of takes, she kind of leaned in and said to me, Bob, if you have what you need, would you mind not, shooting this next take? And I said, absolutely fine. Once I got over the fact that she had been whispering in my ear. And uh, so yeah, I did not shoot because I had been in her sight lines. I had been distracting a little bit. So you don't want to be in the shot. You don't want to be in a reflection somewhere. And you definitely don't want to be in someone's sight lines. So it disrupts their, kind of mental thought process as they're going through. Uh, a Master Builder, was based on an Eric Ibsen play that's very famous, I guess. And these guys made the film in a short amount of time in a low budget kind of way. Wallace Shawn. Um, yeah, these two, Wallace Shawn and Andre. Wally and Andre is a pretty well known classic movie thing where they just have this ongoing conversation about everything. So the
So
two of them, and of course Jonathan in the picture as well. Robert De Niro had a great experience with him. I mean, I kept thinking to myself, he and I are the same age, couple of old Italian guys. Why shouldn't I be able to talk to him? And I did. And the first thing I said to him was that he was going to be working on a film called Hands of Stone, the Roberto Duran boxing story. So the night before, I had watched a couple of Roberto Duran and Sugar Ray Leonard boxing matches. And when I had him up in front of the camera and we had a break before we started, I said to him, those were some of the best fights ever, weren't they? And he turned around, looked at me, and for a minute I thought he was going to be like the taxi guy who said, "Are you talking to me? Are you talking to me?" Like that famous scene, but he didn't. He said, he said that they were, that they were. And when the shoot was over and they were exiting off the roof of the brownstone, he stopped and turned around and came back and said, "Good job, Bob." And he shook my hand. And I thought that was great. And the feedback I got was that he's very difficult to photograph. He doesn't look natural or anything like that. He says they never saw him look more natural. It's hard to get a good shot of him, and you have 20 of them. So, it's just a matter of the same thing with the family portraits. If you get to know someone a little bit, if you get to talk to them, if you get to look at them face to face, you can somehow evoke whatever emotion you're looking for to get out of there. Just a natural expression is what we're looking for here. And
so we have a comment from Carol Bagat-Forte. It is remarkable that in a quote unquote still shot, so much movement and emotion are captured in 1 second. Thank you for the comment. And Stephanie Morales says, yes, definitely.
Yeah, yeah, and how you know, this is the poster for Ricky and the Flash, and we probably have the band photo here from which it was taken. Picture worth 1,000 words in different languages. I always enjoyed seeing it that way, but this particular shot of Merrill, I did this a lot with people that I was had to photograph. I would have them face away from the camera, you know, just turn 3/4 of the way away, like this, exactly. And I would provide some sort of noise, you know, a clap, if I had an assistant, a knock on the door or something. And when you hear that noise, the subject was instructed to turn around as quick as possible and try to find the camera, you know, and once they did, look inside. So it provided a little bit of spontaneity, you know, to this thing. It made the shoots a little more fun, truthfully, and it also gave you that little extra second of something that was spontaneous and natural, and that seemed to work for Meryl. She liked it. This is the photo originally that the poster was made from. You can see she's positioned 3/4 of the way toward the background. She's got the guitar slung over her butt, and that's Rick Springfield next to her. Rick Rosas, who's the bass player who passed away, and Joe Vitale is the drummer, and of course that's Bernie Worrell on the keyboard. Bernie played with Stop Making Sense, David Byrne. But and this, you know, like I said, where I live, we drive down the West Side Highway to get to New York City, and I always see billboards on the West Side Highway, and I would think that's the top of the profession. You know, the guys who are shooting these ads really, you know, that's the top level, beautiful stuff. I said, boy, if I'd ever get one of my pictures on a billboard. So there it was. This is Lower Manhattan before the movie came out. We were at the premiere and did all that good stuff, and just I always think it raised my career from a B plus to an A minus once I saw what was up on the billboard there. This crew photo, Jonathan and some others had said, you got to do it, you got to do it, you got to do it. And we planned it several times, and we always ran out of time, and we weren't able. This is the last night of the production, and I told the first assistant AD, that when we come back from dinner, we have to do this, and we did. I got up on the ladder and I set the timer. I pretended to fall down the ladder as I came over and slid into the picture. And everyone's the smiles and the laughter on these people's faces. That doesn't happen all the time. Meryl, right in the middle. She was a big part of everything we did, and she wanted to be there. And this is just a great look back with a lot of smiles. So and this is Jonathan on location. One of those times when they shot the making of the movie, and they interviewed him.
Okay. So
Okay.
Bob, we got through all of them. We did every one of the photos.
Great.
If we have any questions, Bob is here to answer your questions or hear your comments. Carol has one. Carol, just have to turn on your microphone.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm very impressed with some of these. I have particularly the ones taken in the air of Manhattan. I believe that I have seen a couple of them over the years when the World Trade Center was still up. I just wondered, Bob, how many publications have presented your work on their front pages? Do you know?
Oh, I don't actually. Sim gave me a list of them not too long ago, but the New York Times and Real Simple magazines, and there are a lot of them. The names don't come to me at the moment, but it was definitely the Times, the Daily News, other publications. certainly the pictures of Neil Young were on my industry publication and in some magazine work, the Manchurian Candidate photos, where I was supposed to be just an extra. I wound up, taking real pictures. I was instructed to do so. And those wound up, on international magazine covers and things like that. So, yeah. I just, I'm in the right place at the right time, and like I said, the whole digital thing made things a lot easier.
Okay, so
Great.
thank you so very much
Yeah.
to Bob. Thank
Mhm.
you. Thank you so much for putting that collection of photos together for us and showing us what it's all about: studio and location photography, aerial photography, motion picture photography. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you, Sim. I so admire your interview style. Here we call it guardrails, where the thing on the side of the road that keeps you from, whenever I start drifting, you were able to nudge me back onto the road in a guardrail style, and I do admire the way you do that. You're a well-rounded guy, and
Thank
I've
you.
enjoyed this. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob, but you're a very good driver. Okay, so let's
Thanks.
take a look at next week. We have Alti e Bassi. It's hard to imagine a vocal quintet could sing Bach and Van Halen in the same breath. That is, unless you've heard Alti e Bassi. The five virtuosi modulate their voices to turn their voices into instruments as different as the drum set, the violin, and a heavily distorted electric guitar. Oh, and they also sing harmony. Their repertoire is as thrilling as their vocal acrobatics, and maybe that's why they've won so many international awards and been received by the president of Italy. Come welcome Alti e Bassi to our show and ask them for yourself just how they do it. As always, all information about upcoming shows may be found at www.simeonmorrow.com. So again, thank you to Bob Vergara, and thank you to the patients and staff of the Hackensack University Medical Center. And most of all, thanks to you, our participants, who make it all worthwhile. From Vienna, Austria, and from New York City, goodbye and see you next Wednesday.
Thanks, Sim.